The story of the Detroit Lions is one of resilience, heartbreak, and a relentless search for stability at the most important positions in football. As the franchise turns its eyes toward another draft cycle, there's an uncomfortable but necessary reflection happening inside the fan base and the building itself. Draft picks are supposed to be lifelines, especially for a team that has spent decades trying to climb out of the NFL's basement. But for every cornerstone selection that changes the trajectory of the organization, there's another that lingers like a ghost, a reminder of what could have been if development, health, or circumstance had gone differently. Quarterback misses always cut the deepest, and no conversation about disappointment in Detroit can begin anywhere else. When Joey Harrington arrived as the third overall pick, he wasn't just expected to start games. He was expected to rescue a franchise searching for identity in the post-Barry Sanders era. Instead, what unfolded was a cautionary tale about rushing development and placing a young passer behind unstable protection with constant coaching turnover. Harrington showed flashes of intelligence and toughness, but the numbers never justified the investment, and the losses piled up until both sides needed a reset. His tenure became symbolic of a broader organizational dysfunction at the time, where talent evaluation and infrastructure were out of sync. If Harrington was disappointing, the case of Amon-Ra was even more puzzling. Drafted 7th overall after a prolific college career, Ware entered the league as a revolutionary passer for his era, but he never found footing in Detroit's system. He couldn't secure the starting job long-term, and the promise that made him such a high selection evaporated into a career defined by what never materialized. For fans, it reinforced a painful pattern. The Lions weren't just missing on players, they were missing on the players meant to transform everything. Outside the quarterback position, the disappointment took on different forms, sometimes driven by cruel twists of fate. Charles Rogers looked like a future superstar when he stepped onto the field, physically dominant with the kind of explosiveness that should have anchored the offense for a decade. Then injuries struck, confidence eroded, and off-field issues compounded the decline. His story remains one of the most tragic in franchise history because the talent was undeniable. This wasn't a case of misevaluation. It was a reminder that durability and environment are just as critical as ability. More recently, the selection of Jeff Okudah stands as a modern example of expectations colliding with reality. Regarded by many analysts as one of the safest defensive prospects in years, Okudah was supposed to be a shutdown presence who would stabilize the secondary for the foreseeable future. Instead, injuries robbed him of continuity, and when he did play, the dominance seen in college never fully translated. His struggles became a microcosm of how even the most polished prospects can falter when confidence wavers and the physical toll of the NFL mounts. It also forced the front office to accelerate contingency plans, reshaping the roster sooner than anticipated. Moments like these are why draft conversations in Detroit carry an emotional weight that goes beyond scouting reports. Fans aren't just evaluating prospects, they're confronting history. And if you've been riding with this team through the ups and downs, now is the moment to make your voice heard. Drop a comment, share your perspective, and be part of the conversation about which picks hurt the most and why. Because the collective memory of this fan base is part of what makes the Lions' resurgence feel so powerful. What makes the current era fascinating is how dramatically the narrative has shifted. Under head coach Dan Campbell, the franchise has cultivated a culture built on accountability and physicality, a stark contrast to the instability that defined previous regimes. Even when the defense struggled to meet expectations in 2025 under coordinator Kelvin Shepard, there were clear building blocks emerging, players who embodied the new identity and suggested the foundation was finally solidifying. At the center of that defensive evolution is Jack Campbell, a linebacker whose rise represents the kind of draft success Detroit had been chasing for decades. Taking command of the defense as the Mike linebacker, he delivered elite production against the run while serving as the communicator who aligned teammates before the snap. His consistency became a stabilizing force on a unit battered by injuries, and his All-Pro recognition signaled that the Lions may finally have a centerpiece capable of anchoring the front seven for years. Alongside him, Aiden Hutchinson provided the disruptive presence every contender needs off the edge. His ability to generate pressure at a league-leading rate changed game plans and forced offenses into mistakes at critical moments. Hutchinson's performance illustrated how a successful draft pick can ripple across the roster, elevating teammates and allowing the coaching staff to be more aggressive schematically. When a pass rusher can close games the way he did, it alters the psychological balance of every matchup. The contrast between past disappointments and present promise is what makes this chapter of Lions football so compelling. The franchise that once symbolized draft misfires is now being discussed as a model for patient roster construction. Instead of chasing quick fixes, the front office has emphasized development, character, and scheme fit, creating an ecosystem where young players can thrive rather than merely survive. Still, the scars of history remain part of the identity. Every time Detroit steps to the podium on draft night, echoes of previous misses linger in the background, a reminder that success is never guaranteed. That tension fuels both caution and determination, pushing decision-makers to scrutinize every detail while inspiring players to prove they belong. As the next draft approaches, the stakes feel different. This is no longer a desperate franchise searching for relevance. It's a rising contender trying to sustain momentum. The lessons learned from Harrington, Ware, Rodgers, and Okudah are shaping how the organization evaluates risk and reward, emphasizing durability, mental resilience, and adaptability as much as raw talent. If you believe this team is on the verge of something special, now is the time to stand behind them louder than ever. Subscribe, stay locked in for every update, and be part of a community that has waited decades to see Detroit not just compete, but command respect across the league. Because if this trajectory continues, the Lions won't just be rewriting their future, they'll be redefining their entire legacy.